Event Horizon 1997 wasn't just a science fiction horror film about a haunted spaceship that went to hell. It was a studio disaster where over 40 minutes of footage was lost forever in a salt mine.
Blame for the loss of the Event Horizon, and 7 years of shame.
Test audiences vomited during screenings. The director delivered a cut the studio called unwatchable. Actors suffered psychological trauma that required therapy, and the original ending showing eternal evil was replaced with false hope. These are 16 facts about a film so disturbing that most of it had to be destroyed. Original cut was over 2 hours and deemed unwatchable by test audiences. Director Paul W.S. Anderson delivered a 130-minute director's cut to Paramount Pictures in early 1997. The studio screened it for test audiences who responded with horror and disgust. Audience members walked out during the graphic hell sequence, showing the original crew's fate. Some viewers vomited. Others demanded refunds. Paramount received the worst test screening scores in company history. Studio executives panicked and ordered massive cuts. Anderson was forced to remove over 40 minutes of footage in just 3 weeks to reach a 96-minute runtime suitable for wide release. The deleted material included extensive character development, additional backstory about the Event Horizon's mission, and significantly more graphic violence. The deleted footage was stored in a salt mine and deteriorated beyond recovery. After theatrical release, Paramount stored the 40-plus minutes of deleted footage in a Transylvanian salt mine where the studio kept archived film materials. The salt mine's controlled environment was supposed to preserve film indefinitely. However, the Event Horizon footage was stored improperly without climate control. Years later, when Paul W.S. Anderson requested the footage for a potential director's cut DVD release, Paramount discovered the film had completely deteriorated. The footage had been destroyed by moisture, mold, and chemical decomposition. Only a few poor-quality VHS workprint copies survived, showing fragments of deleted scenes. The lost footage included the complete hell sequence, showing the original crew's self-mutilation and murder in graphic detail. Also lost were expanded scenes of Weir's possession and the Event Horizon's creation. Anderson called the loss devastating and one of the great tragedies of modern horror cinema. The footage is gone forever. The hell sequence was inspired by Hieronymus Bosch. Paintings. Paul W.S. Anderson designed the infamous hell sequence using imagery directly inspired by Hieronymus Bosch's The Garden of Earthly Delights triptych. He showed the paintings to his production designer and special effects team as visual references. The sequence depicted the original Event Horizon crew engaging in acts of extreme violence, torture, sexual assault, and self-mutilation. Bodies were shown torn apart, organs removed, people eating each other. Anderson wanted the sequence to be unwatchable and succeeded completely. The makeup and prosthetic effects were so realistic that crew members became physically ill viewing dailies. Some effects artists refused to continue working on the sequence. The British Board of Film Classification initially threatened to ban the film entirely if the hell sequence remained uncut. Even in heavily censored form, the brief glimpses remaining in the theatrical cut disturbed audiences profoundly. Lawrence Fishburne refused to film certain scenes and demanded rewrites. Lawrence Fishburne, playing Captain Miller, became increasingly uncomfortable with Event Horizon's graphic content during filming. He'd signed on to a science fiction thriller, not an extreme horror film. After viewing dailies of the hell sequence, Fishburne demanded script changes. He refused to film several planned scenes showing Miller's disturbing visions. Fishburne particularly objected to a sequence where Miller hallucinates his son burning alive with explicit burn makeup effects on the child actor. He told Anderson the scene was exploitative and went too far. Anderson was forced to rewrite and reshoot several Miller scenes with less graphic content. The conflict created tension on set between Fishburne and Anderson. Fishburne later admitted he regretted making the film at all. He called it the most disturbing professional experience I've had and avoided discussing Event Horizon in interviews for years afterward. Sam Neill suffered psychological effects from playing Dr. Weir. Sam Neill portrayed the increasingly possessed Dr. Weir, requiring extensive time in disturbing makeup and performing psychologically intense scenes. Neill spent hours in the makeup chair having prosthetics applied, showing progressive physical corruption. The possessed Weir makeup featured removed eyelids, scarification, and self-inflicted wounds. Neill had to keep his eyes open for extended periods without blinking, causing severe eye irritation and temporary vision problems. More concerning were psychological effects. Neill later described experiencing nightmares and depression during and after filming. The character's descent into madness and cruelty affected Neill's mental state. He consulted a therapist after production wrapped. Neill said, "Playing Weir got inside my head in ways I wasn't prepared for." He turned down similar horror roles afterward. The experience taught him to be more careful about accepting psychologically demanding parts without adequate preparation. The Gravity Drive set was built. Upside down to create vertigo, production designer Joseph Bennett created the Event Horizon's Gravity Drive chamber as a massive set built inverted to create spatial disorientation. The set hung from the ceiling with corridors extending downward rather than upward. This counterintuitive construction made cast and crew feel constantly off balance and uncomfortable. Bennett wanted visitors to the set to experience immediate unease without understanding why. The technique worked perfectly. Actors reported feeling nauseous and claustrophobic working in the inverted space. The Gravity Drive's rotating magnetic rings were practical effects weighing several tons, spinning at controlled speeds around the inverted set. Safety concerns were significant because cast members had to work near the massive moving machinery. One minor accident occurred when a ring's rotation mechanism malfunctioned during filming. Though nobody was seriously injured, the unsettling set design contributed substantially to the film's oppressive atmosphere. Paramount forced release date that prevented proper post-production. Paramount scheduled Event Horizon for August 15, 1997 release to fill a late summer slot. This date was determined before filming even began. When production ran over schedule due to complex effects work and extensive reshoots demanded after test screenings, Anderson found himself with insufficient post-production time. He had only 6 weeks to complete final editing, sound mixing, visual effects, and color grading. A film of Event Horizon's complexity typically requires 6 months of post-production. The compressed timeline forced Anderson to rush every aspect of finishing the film. Visual effects shots were completed, but not properly integrated. Sound design was mixed hastily without proper layering. Color grading was minimal. The Event Horizon ship design was based on Notre Dame Cathedral. Production designer Joseph Bennett based the Event Horizon spaceship's Gothic architecture on Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. He wanted the ship to feel ancient, religious, and foreboding rather than sleek and futuristic. The ship's exterior featured flying buttresses, pointed arches, and spire-like structures directly inspired by Gothic cathedral design. The interior corridors incorporated cathedral ceiling vaults and religious iconography. Bennett argued that Gothic architecture evolved to inspire awe and fear of God, perfect emotions for a ship that literally went to hell. The design created immediate unease because spaceships aren't supposed to look like medieval churches. This architectural dissonance made the Event Horizon feel wrong before anything supernatural occurred. Jason Isaacs improvised his character's death scene. Jason Isaacs played DJ, the Event Horizon Rescue Crew's medical technician. His death scene originally showed DJ simply being killed by an explosion. Isaacs found this boring and requested to improvise something more memorable. He suggested DJ be graphically killed by explosive decompression. The effects team created a harness that would yank Isaacs backward through a narrow corridor at high speed. Isaacs performed the stunt himself without doubles, despite significant injury risk. The shot required one take because the harness mechanism could only be reset with hours of preparation. Isaacs was slammed backward so violently, he suffered bruised ribs despite protective padding. The take was perfect and remained in the film. The film's original score was rejected and replaced. Last-minute composer Michael Kamen originally scored Event Horizon with an experimental electronic soundtrack emphasizing dissonance and industrial sounds. Kamen wanted the music to sound alien and uncomfortable, matching the film's themes. He spent months developing unusual sonic textures, using synthesizers and processed recordings. Paramount executives hated the score after hearing the first screening. They found it too weird and too uncommercial for mainstream audiences. With only 3 weeks until release, they hired composer Michael Kamen. They hired Orbital and Michael Kamen to collaborate on a completely new score. The replacement score was composed and recorded in under 2 weeks, an almost impossible timeline. British Board of Film Classification required 18 separate cuts. The British Board of Film Classification initially gave Event Horizon an 18 rating, meaning no one under 18 could view it. Even with this restrictive rating, the BBFC demanded 18 separate cuts totaling over 2 minutes of footage. The cuts removed graphic violence, sexual content, and disturbing imagery from the hell sequence. The BBFC specifically objected to shots showing implied sexual assault, explicit disembowelment, and self-inflicted eye trauma. Paramount complied with all cuts to avoid an outright ban in the United Kingdom market. The British release was noticeably shorter than American and European versions. British audiences complained about obvious continuity gaps where cuts occurred. The BBFC maintained their decision was necessary to prevent unjustifiable violence and disturbing content. Kathleen Quinlan's zero-gravity medical bay scene took 3 days to film. The scene where Peters, played by Kathleen Quinlan, floats through the medical bay in zero gravity required 3 days of filming, using complex wire work and rotating sets. Quinlan was suspended on wires for up to 8 hours per day, while the entire set rotated around her to simulate weightlessness. The physical demands were extreme. Quinlan suffered severe back pain from the harness cutting into her body. Wire work caused bruising across her torso and legs. The disorientation from being suspended while the room spun caused nausea. Quinlan requested breaks every hour, but Anderson needed continuous takes for the complex choreography. She later described it as the most physically punishing scene I've ever filmed. The final sequence in the film lasts approximately 90 seconds. The liquid-filled stasis pods were actually filled with water. The rescue crew's stasis pods were supposed to contain breathable, oxygenated liquid. Production couldn't afford the specialized liquid breathing apparatus used in films like The Abyss. Instead, the pods were simply filled with water and actors held their breath. Each pod scene required actors to submerge completely and act naturally while holding their breath for extended periods. Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, and other cast members spent hours partially submerged in cold water. The pods weren't heated, and filming occurred during British winter. Actors frequently became hypothermic and required warming breaks. Several cast members developed ear infections from the contaminated water. Safety divers stood by for every take in case actors needed emergency assistance. Philip Eisner's original script was much more philosophical and less gory screenwriter. Philip Eisner conceived Event Horizon as a philosophical science fiction film exploring themes of consciousness, dimensional physics, and the nature of evil. His original script contained minimal gore and focused on psychological horror and existential dread. The hell dimension was suggested rather than shown explicitly. Studio executives at Paramount read Eisner's script and demanded it be rewritten as a more commercial horror film. They wanted explicit violence and jump scares. Eisner reluctantly added more graphic content, but maintained his philosophical framework. During production, Paul W. S. Anderson pushed the violence even further beyond Eisner's revisions. Eisner watched the finished film and barely recognized his original concept. He later said, "I wrote Solaris, and they made Hellraiser in space." Alternate ending Paul W.C.S. Anderson filmed a different ending that Paramount rejected during post-production. The original ending showed Miller successfully destroying the event horizon, but revealed that fragments of the ship survived. The final scene depicted a salvage crew, 7 years later, discovering pieces of the event horizon drifting in space. As they brought a section aboard their ship, crew members began experiencing the same hallucinations and madness. The ending implied the event horizon's evil was indestructible and would continue spreading. Paramount executives demanded the ambiguous, hopeful ending where Miller and Stark survive and await rescue. Event Horizon could have been a philosophical science fiction film with restrained horror and a complete director's vision. Instead, it became a compromised theatrical cut with its darkest footage lost forever in a salt mine. The real ending implied eternal evil. The original score disappeared, and a generation of horror fans still wonder what that missing 40 minutes contained.